How would you survive a zombie apocalypse in real life? Picture this. You wake up tomorrow, glance out your window, and the world you know is gone. Empty streets, except for shambling figures with hollow eyes, their guttural moans echoing through abandoned buildings. Cars rust in gridlocked intersections. Shops are looted, and the air carries an eerie silence broken only by distant screams. Are you ready for this? What's your first move? Grab a backpack, a weapon, or run to find someone you trust? Let's dive into this scenario, inspired by the brutal, gripping world of The Last of Us, and explore what surviving a zombie apocalypse would really be like, with a dose of realism that'll make you question your choices. Let's set the stage. In The Last of Us, the apocalypse is triggered by a fungus, cordyceps, that infects humans, turning them into aggressive, mindless creatures. Sounds far-fetched, right? But is it? In reality, cordyceps exists, infecting insects like ants, hijacking their bodies in terrifying ways. Scientists say a jump to humans is unlikely but not impossible. Imagine a mutated fungus exploiting vulnerabilities in the human nervous system, or maybe a lab-engineered virus, like some conspiracy theories whisper about modern pandemics. Here's the kicker. How fast would society collapse? Probably faster than you think. The 2020 pandemic showed how quickly systems can grind to a halt. Now add ravenous infected sprinting through the streets. How long do you think your city would hold? Let's start with the first days. You're at home, maybe watching news about riots in nearby cities. Suddenly the power cuts out, your phone's dead, and sirens wail. Through the window you see a neighbor sprinting, chased by something that doesn't look human. What do? Lock the door and hide? Or go investigate? In The Last of Us, Joel and Sarah face this chaos head-on, and the lesson is brutal. Hesitation can kill. In real life, your first choice could make or break you. Got food for a week, water, a basement, or attic to barricade? Most people don't. Studies show urban households typically have supplies for 3 days. 3 days. If infected are pounding at your door, how long could you stretch a can of beans? Now, let's talk about the infected. In The Last of Us, they come in flavors. Runners, fast and freshly infected. Stalkers, sneaky and deadly. Clickers, blind but with razor-sharp hearing. And bloaters, walking biological tanks. In real life, what would zombies be like? A cordyceps-like fungus could theoretically rewire human behavior, boosting aggression and shutting down higher brain functions like speech or reasoning. But the human body has limits. An infected wouldn't be a supernatural monster. They'd still rely on muscles and bones, vulnerable to exhaustion and injury. So with the right strategy, you could take them down. But here's the question. Could you fight an infected who used to be your neighbor, someone you knew? Or would you run? Science gives us some wild insights. A 2017 University of Leicester study estimated that a zombie apocalypse could wipe out humanity in about 100 days, assuming each zombie infects one person daily. But that doesn't account for our adaptability. In The Last of Us, survivors like Joel and Ellie form groups, establish quarantine zones and master their environment. You'd need to do the same. Think about it. Where would you find supplies? Supermarkets are obvious but dangerous, crawling with infected or looters, maybe a hardware store for tools or a pharmacy for meds. What's your plan? And how would you get there without becoming lunch? So you've made it through the first few hours of this nightmare. Maybe you're holed up in your apartment, heart pounding, listening to the chaos outside. Or maybe you're already on the move, weaving through alleys to avoid the infected. Either way, you're alive for now. But surviving a real-life The Last of Us style apocalypse isn't just about outrunning zombies. It's about outsmarting them, outlasting them, and most importantly, outsmarting other survivors. Let's dig into what comes next. What's your next step? Stay put and fortify or hit the road, and if you're moving, where are you going? Let's talk survival basics. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie scavenge for food, weapons, and medical supplies while navigating a world where trust is a luxury. In real life, you'd face the same grind. Food and water are your first priorities. The average person needs about 2 liters of water daily and roughly 2,000 calories to function. Without power, perishable food spoils fast. Think 48 hours for most fridge items. Canned goods, dry grains, or MREs become gold. But here's the catch. Every other survivor is thinking the same thing. That corner store you're eyeing, probably already raided or a death trap. So, where do you look? A vending machine in an office building? A forgotten pantry in an abandoned house? Tell me, what's one place in your neighborhood you'd check? For supplies? Now let's get real about the infected. In The Last of Us, clickers are blind but deadly, reacting to sound. A real-world zombie might not be so cinematic, but a fungal infection could mess with the brain's sensory processing. Imagine infected with heightened hearing or smell, like dogs tracking a scent. A 2019 study on brain parasites like Toxoplasma gondii showed they can alter host behavior, making animals reckless or aggressive. If a cordyceps-like pathogen hit humans, it might amplify primal instincts, turning people into relentless hunters. You'd need to move quietly, avoid open spaces, and mask your scent. Ever thought about how loud your shoes are on pavement? Or how your deodorant might give you away? What's one thing you'd grab right now to stay stealthy? Weapons are another. Reality check. In The Last of Us, Joel wields pipes, bricks, and the occasional gun. In real life, firearms are great if you have them, but ammo runs out fast, and guns are loud. A single shot could draw every infected in a mile radius. Melee weapons like a crowbar or a machete are quieter and don't need reloading. Problem is, you're getting up close and personal with something that wants to rip you apart. Could you swing a bat at an infected's head knowing one mistake means you're done? And let's not forget, in a real apocalypse, you're not Joel. You're you, no plot armor. What's a skill you have right now that could keep you alive? Then, there's the human factor. In The Last of Us, survivors form factions. Some help, some kill for scraps. Real life would be no different. A 2015 study on disaster psychology found that humans band together in crises, but only to a point. When resources dwindle, trust erodes. That guy offering you a can of soup? He might want your backpack or your life. You'd need to read people fast. Body language, tone, eye contact. Ever notice how someone fidgets when they're lying? What's one person you'd trust to have your back in this mess, and why? The environment itself is a character in The Last of Us. Overgrown cities, crumbling highways, nature reclaiming. What's hers? In a real apocalypse, urban areas would be death zones early on. Too many people, too many infected. Rural areas might seem safer, but they're isolated, and supplies are scarce. Where would you go? A forest, a small town, or maybe a fortified building like a school? Each choice has trade-offs. A forest offers cover, but no food. A town might have supplies, but also survivors, and not all are friendly. What's your gut telling you? Stay urban or go rural? All right, you're still with me. Surviving in this The Last of Us inspired nightmare. Let's say you've made it past the first week. Maybe you're barricaded in a house with a few cans of food, a kitchen knife, and a backpack stuffed with whatever you could grab. Or maybe you're on the move, ducking through shadows, heart racing every time you hear a twig snap. Either way, the honeymoon phase of this apocalypse is over. The initial adrenaline is fading, and reality is sinking in. This is your life now. So, what's keeping you going? Is it hope of finding safety, a loved one, or just pure stubbornness? Tell me, what's the one thing that would make you fight to survive another day? Let's talk long-term survival. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie navigate a world where every day is a gamble. You'd need to think like them, strategic, resourceful, and paranoid. First up, shelter. Staying in one place too long is risky. Supplies. Run out and infected or raiders will find you. But moving constantly burns energy and exposes you to danger. Imagine you've found a decent spot. A small office building maybe, with lockable doors and a flat roof for lookout. Sounds good, right? But what if it's near a water source like a river that attracts infected at night? A 2018 study on urban decay suggests abandoned buildings become unstable within months without maintenance. Leaky roofs, mold, collapsing floors. What's one thing you'd check to make sure your hideout is safe? Now let's get into scavenging. In The Last of Us, every desk drawer or abandoned car might hold a bandage, a bullet, or half a candy bar. In real life, scavenging is a science. You'd need to prioritize high-value targets, pharmacies for antibiotics, hardware stores for tools, or even schools for canned food in cafeterias. But here's the twist. looters hit the obvious spots first. A 2013 analysis of disaster looting showed that within 72 hours, most accessible stores are picked clean, so you'd need to think outside the box. Ever consider a pet store? They stock freeze-dried food and water purification tablets for aquariums, or a gym, protein bars and bottled water galore, whereas one place you'd scavenge that others might overlook. The infected are still out there and they're not slowing down. In The Last of Us, clickers use echolocation-like hearing, making stealth critical. A real-world fungal infection might not create such dramatic monsters, but it could mess with the brain's pain receptors. Imagine infected who don't feel a broken leg or a knife wound. They just keep coming. A 2021 neuroscience study on pain suppression in extreme stress states suggests humans can push past normal limits when adrenaline spikes. That means an infected could chase you longer than you'd expect. How would you handle that? A trap like a tripwire with cans to alert you, or would you risk a fight? What's one tool or weapon you'd want in your hands right now? Let's not ignore the mental toll. In The Last of Us, Ellie's humor and Joel's grit keep them sane. In real life, isolation and fear would grind you down. A 2020 study on quarantine psychology found that after just 10 days, people report anxiety, depression, and even hallucinations. Now imagine months of this, with no end in sight. You'd need routines to stay sharp, maybe carving tally marks for each day you survive like a prisoner, or talking to yourself like I'm talking to you now. What's one thing you'd do to keep your mind from breaking? A song you'd hum, a memory you'd cling to. And then there's other survivors. In The Last of Us, groups like the Fireflies or Hunters show how humans can be as dangerous as infected. In a real apocalypse, alliances would be your lifeline, but also your biggest risk. A 2016 sociology study on post-disaster communities found that groups form around shared goals, but betrayal spikes when food or safety is at stake. Imagine meeting a small group offering you shelter. They seem friendly, but one keeps eyeing your backpack. Do you trust them, or go it alone? Who's one person in your life you'd want by your side, and what makes them reliable in this hell? You're still here, fighting through this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you've found a temporary hideout, a dusty attic with a creaky ladder, or an abandoned gas station with a few unlooted shelves. Or maybe you're still on the move, your shoes worn thin, every shadow a potential threat. Either way, you're starting to feel the weight of this world. The hunger gnawing at your stomach, the constant tension in your shoulders. So tell me, what's driving you to keep going? Is it the hope of finding a safe zone, like the quarantine zones in The Last of Us? Or is it just the raw instinct to survive? Picture yourself right now. What's the one thing you're clutching, whether it's a weapon, a photo, or just a shred of hope? Let's talk about movement. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie cross cities, forests, and rivers always, weighing the risks of each path. In a real apocalypse, every step is a calculation. Stay in the city, and you're dodging infected and raiders, but you've got more scavenging options. Head to the countryside, and you might find quiet, but good luck finding food or medicine. A 2014 urban planning study showed that cities become death traps in crises due to population density, but rural areas lack infrastructure for long-term survival. So, what's your call? Would you stick to familiar streets, even if they're crawling with danger, or take a chance on the open road? Imagine you're at a crossroads, literally. Which way do you go and why? Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of staying alive. Resources. In The Last of Us, crafting is a lifesaver, turning rags and alcohol into a med kit or nails and tape into a shiv. In real life, you'd need to get creative too. A 2017 survival analysis estimated that without resupply, most people would exhaust their resources in 2 weeks. Water is the biggest problem. You can survive 3 days without it, but contaminated sources, like rivers or puddles, could kill you faster than thirst. Boiling water works, but you need fire, and fire attracts attention. Ever tried starting a fire without matches? A lens from glasses or a battery and steel wool can do it, but it's not easy. What's one item in your house right now you'd repurpose for survival? The infected are evolving, or at least you're noticing how they work. In The Last of Us, clickers and stalkers adapt to their environment, using sound or stealth to hunt. A real fungal infection might not be so cinematic, but it could mess with the brain's motor functions, making infected erratic yet persistent. A 2022 study on neurodegenerative diseases showed that brain infections can cause muscle spasms and heightened aggression like rabies on steroids. Imagine an infected that doesn't sprint, but shambles relentlessly, ignoring pain. You could outrun it, but for how long? And what if it's not alone? Would you set a trap, maybe broken glass on the floor to slow them down? Or find a choke? Point like a narrow hallway to take them out one by one. What's your strategy? Mental resilience is your real weapon now. In The Last of Us, Ellie clings to her comic books and music to stay human. In real life, the grind of constant fear would chip away at you. A 2019 psychology study on prolonged stress found that humans need small rituals to cope. Writing, praying, even talking to an imaginary friend. Picture yourself alone for weeks, no one to talk to. What would you do to keep your sanity? Maybe you'd tell yourself stories or replay old conversations in your head. What's one memory you'd hold on to remind you who you are? And then there's the human threat. In The Last of Us, raiders like the hunters are often worse than infected, driven by desperation or greed. In a real apocalypse, you'd face the same. A 2018 anthropology study on post-disaster societies found that groups form hierarchies fast, and outsiders are rarely trusted. Imagine you stumble across a camp, fires burning, people laughing, but armed guards at the perimeter. They offer you food but want your weapons in exchange. Do you join them, risking betrayal, or keep moving knowing you're burning calories you can't replace? Who's one person you'd trust to watch your back, and what makes them different from the rest? You're still kicking, scraping by in this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're huddled in a makeshift shelter, the wind whistling through cracked windows, or maybe you're crouched in an alley, clutching a crowbar, listening for the telltale shuffle of infected. The world feels smaller now, doesn't it? Every choice is life or death, every sound a potential threat. So tell me, what's keeping you grounded? Is it the thought of someone you need to find, like Ellie searching for purpose in The Last of Us? Or is it just the refusal to let this broken world win? Picture yourself in this moment. What's the one thing you're holding on to, physically or mentally, to keep pushing forward? Let's talk about mobility and strategy. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie move with purpose, whether it's to find the fireflies or escape a death trap. In a real apocalypse, you'd need a plan too. Staying in one spot too long invites trouble. Raiders, infected, or just starvation. But constant movement is exhausting and every step risks exposure. A 2016 survival study estimated that humans can walk about 20 miles a day with minimal gear, but add a heavy pack, hunger, and fear, and that drops fast. Where are you headed? A military base, hoping for a quarantine zone like in the game, or somewhere remote, like a cabin in the woods? Here's the rub. Urban areas have supplies but danger. Rural areas have space but no resources. What's your destination and what's driving you there? Scavenging is your lifeline now. In The Last of Us, every abandoned house or store could hide a treasure, a bandage, a battery, a rusty pipe. In real life, you'd need to master the art of finding the overlooked. A 2020 report on urban foraging noted that people miss hidden caches, like employee break rooms or storage closets in strip malls. Ever thought about a library? Not for books, but for vending machines or emergency kits stashed in offices. Or a garden center. Seeds for long-term food, fertilizer for makeshift explosives. What's one place you'd hit that others might ignore, and what would you hope to find there? The infected are still a constant threat. In The Last of Us, runners are fast, clickers are relentless, and bloaters are nightmares. A real-world fungal infection might not create such distinct types, but it could amplify human endurance. A 2023 study on fungal pathogens suggested they could disrupt the brain's fatigue signals, letting infected push past normal limits, like a marathon runner on adrenaline. Imagine an infected chasing you for blocks, not tiring, not stopping. You could climb a fence or hide in a dumpster. But what if they smell you? Would you use a distraction? like throwing a bottle to draw them away, or stand your ground with whatever's in your hand. What's one tactic you'd try to outsmart them? Your mental state is starting to fray. In The Last of Us, Joel's gruff stoicism and Ellie's defiance keep them going, but even they crack under pressure. In real life, the isolation and constant danger would hit hard. A 2021 mental health study found that prolonged survival stress can trigger hypervigilance, where every noise feels like a threat, even when it's just the wind. You'd need anchors to stay sane. Maybe you'd carry a small keepsake, like a ring or a letter to remind you of better days. Or maybe you'd talk to yourself, narrating your moves like I'm talking to you now. What's one ritual you'd create to keep your head clear in this chaos? And then there's other people. In The Last of Us, groups like the Hunters or the Fireflies show how survivors can be allies or enemies. In a real apocalypse, trust is a gamble. A 2019 sociology study on crisis behavior found that small groups survive better than lone wolves, but only if everyone pulls their weight. Imagine you meet a stranger who offers you a deal, half their food for your map. They seem honest, but their hands shake and they avoid eye contact. Do you make the trade or walk away? Think about it. Who's one person you'd want as your partner in this world, and what skill do they bring that you don't have? You're still alive, carving out an existence in this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're crouched in the ruins of a strip mall, your breath shallow as you listen for the guttural snarls of infected. Or perhaps you've found a temporary haven, a rooftop with a locked hatch, a few cans of soup, and a view of the chaos below. But the clock's ticking. Every day tests your limits, and you're starting to feel it. The ache in your legs, the fog in your mind. So let's get personal. What's keeping you moving forward? Is it a place you're dreaming of, like a mythical safe zone? Or maybe it's someone, a friend, a family member, whose face you see when you close your eyes. Tell me, what's the one thing you'd risk everything for in this world? Let's talk about navigating this broken landscape. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie cross crumbling cities and overgrown wilderness, always balancing speed with stealth. In a real apocalypse, every move is a chess game. Stay too long in one spot, and you're a sitting duck for infected or raiders. Move too fast, and you burn through energy and supplies. A 2017 study on human endurance found that without proper nutrition, physical stamina drops by 50% in just a week. If you're carrying a 20-pound pack, dodging threats and eating scraps, you're looking at maybe 10 miles a day, tops. So where are you headed? A coastal town, hoping for fish and clean water? Or a military outpost, gambling on leftover supplies? What's one landmark near you that you'd aim for, and why? Scavenging is your lifeline, but it's getting harder. In The Last of Us, every rusted car or abandoned shop might hold a prize. A bandage, a bullet, a half-eaten granola bar. In real life, the good spots are long gone by now. A 2021 disaster recovery report showed that in crises, high-value targets like grocery stores are stripped bare within days. You'd need to get clever. Think about a community center, often overlooked, but they stock emergency kits and canned goods for events. Or a mechanic's shop, batteries, fuel cans, maybe even a working radio. What's one place you'd scavenge that others might miss? And what's the one item you'd pray to find there? The infected are relentless. In The Last of Us, clickers. Hunt by sound, stalkers by stealth, and bloaters by sheer terror. A real fungal infection might not be so theatrical, but it could still be horrifying. A 2023 microbiology study suggested that certain fungi can manipulate host behavior, like making ants climb to their doom. In humans, this could mean infected who don't sleep, driven by a primal urge to spread the pathogen. Imagine one shambling toward you, ignoring a broken arm, its eyes locked on you. You could outmaneuver it, maybe climb a fire escape or slip into a storm drain. But what if there's a group of them? Would you use a Molotov cocktail like in the game, risking the noise, or go silent with a knife or a sharpened stick? What's one weapon you'd trust in a pinch? Your mind is under siege too. In The Key, Last of Us, Ellie's wit and Joel's resolve keep them human, but even they falter. In real life, the psychological toll would be brutal. A 2020 study on extreme isolation found that after 2 weeks, people start losing track of time and paranoia creeps in. You might start seeing threats where there are none. A creaking floorboard becomes an infected. A shadow becomes a raider. To stay sharp, you'd need a mental anchor. Maybe you'd scratch a journal on whatever paper you find or whisper old movie quotes to yourself. What's one thing you'd do to remind yourself you're still you? Then there's the human element. In The Last of Us, survivors are as dangerous as infected. Think of the cannibals or the military. In a real apocalypse, you'd face the same. A 2018 behavioral study found that in resource-scarce settings, humans turn tribal fast, loyal to their group but hostile to outsiders. Picture this. You spot a campfire at dusk, voices laughing, the smell of cooking food. They wave you over, but their leader wants your backpack as payment to join. Do you negotiate knowing they outnumber you, or slip away into the dark? Who's one person you'd trust to have your back right now, and what makes them your ride or die in this apocalypse? You're still out there, clawing your way through this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're tucked away in a crumbling warehouse, the faint drip of a leaky pipe keeping you company, or you're creeping through an overgrown park, every rustle in the bushes spiking your pulse. The world's a maze of danger now, and you're learning its rules the hard way. So let's get real. What's pushing you to keep moving? Is it the faint hope of a safe haven, like the Firefly's promised cure in the game? Or is it just the stubborn will to not become one of them? Right now, in this moment, what's the one thing you'd hold tight to remind yourself you're still human? Let's talk about adapting to this world. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie learn to read their environment, knowing when to fight, hide, or run. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to become a student of your surroundings. Urban areas are treasure, troves of supplies but crawling with infected. Rural zones offer breathing room but lack resources. A 2019 urban survival study found that cities collapse faster due to population density. But they also hold more hidden caches, like rooftop gardens or office pantries. If you're in a city, you might navigate by rooftops to avoid street-level threats. In the countryside, you'd follow streams for water but risk exposure. Where are you right now in your mind's eye? City, suburb, or wilderness? And what's one feature of that place you'd use to your advantage? Scavenging is getting trickier. In The Last of Us, every overturned drawer or abandoned backpack might yield a scrap of cloth or a single bullet. In real life, you'd need to think like a detective. A 2022 post-disaster logistics report noted that overlooked spots, like maintenance closets in hospitals or vending machines in train stations, often hold untapped supplies. Ever consider a bowling alley? They've got snack bars, heavy pins for weapons and sturdy doors. Or a laundromat. Industrial cleaners can double as disinfectants. What's one offbeat place you'd raid, and what's the one item you'd hope to score? The infected are a constant shadow. In The Last of Us, each type, runners, stalkers, clickers, has its own deadly quirk. A real fungal infection might not create such distinct monsters, but it could still be terrifying. A 2024 study on brain altering pathogens suggested fungi could disrupt impulse control, turning humans into relentless predators who don't register pain. Picture an infected shambling toward you, unfazed by a twisted ankle, its only goal to reach you. You could lure it into a trap, maybe a spiked pit or a collapsing doorway, or you could go silent, slipping past with a distraction like a tossed rock. What's one trick you'd use to outwit an infected closing in? Your mental game is everything now. In The Last of Us, Ellie's sarcasm and Joel's grit anchor them, but even they struggle. In real life, the endless stress would erode you. A 2021 psychology study on survival scenarios found that without social connection, humans start to lose hope after 3 weeks. You might be alone, whispering to yourself to stay focused, or maybe you've got a companion you're not sure you trust. To keep your mind sharp, you'd need a ritual, maybe sketching maps of places you've been or repeating a mantra. What's one thing you do every day to stay sane, even when the world feels like it's collapsing around you? Humans are the wild card. In The Last of Us, groups like the Hunters or the military show how fast morality crumbles. In a real apocalypse, you'd see the same. A 2020 anthropology study on resource scarcity found that survivors often form tight-knit groups, but turn hostile to outsiders within days. Imagine you find a small settlement, maybe a fortified school with solar panels and a garden. They invite you in but demand you surrender your weapon. Their leader seems calm, but one of their scouts keeps staring at your bag. Do you join, hoping for safety, or slip away knowing you're giving up a rare chance at community? Who's one person you'd want beside you in this moment, and what makes them someone you'd trust with your life? You're still holding on, navigating this The Last of Us style apocalypse like a ghost in a shattered world. Maybe you're hiding in the shell of an old bookstore, surrounded by moldy pages and the faint smell of dust, or you're slipping through a deserted suburb, every creak of a fence making your heart skip. The days are blurring together, and survival feels like a tightrope walk over a pit of infected. So let's get inside your head. What's keeping you from giving up? Is it a vision of a better tomorrow, like the faint rumors of a safe zone in The Last of Us, or is it just raw defiance, refusing to let this world break you? Picture yourself right now. What's the one thing, tangible or not, that's keeping your fire burning? Let's talk about strategy and terrain. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie use the environment to their advantage, climbing through windows, sneaking through sewers, or setting traps. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to master your surroundings too. Cities offer cover but swarm with threats. Rural areas give you space but leave you exposed without supplies. A 2020 geography study on disaster zones found that elevated positions, like hills or rooftops, offer the best defense, letting you spot danger from afar. But elevation means exposure, and a fire or flashlight could betray you at night. Are you sticking to low ground like basements or valleys, or going high for the view? What's one feature of your current surroundings you'd use to stay one step ahead? Scavenging is a high-stakes game now. In The Last of Us, every looted pharmacy or car trunk might hold a prize. A rag for a bandage, a bottle for a Molotov. In real life, you'd need to outthink the competition. A 2023 Urban Survival Guide highlighted overlooked spots like janitorial, closets in schools or storage rooms in gyms, often stocked with water, food, or tools. Ever consider a movie theater? Concession stands have sealed snacks, and projection rooms might hide emergency kits, or a pawn shop, knives, maybe even a gun if you're lucky. What's one unconventional place you'd search, and what's the one item you'd kill to find? The infected are a nightmare that never sleeps. In The Last of Us, clickers track sound, stalkers lurk in shadows, and bloaters bulldoze anything in their path. A real fungal infection might not be so cinematic, but it could still be horrifying. A 2024 study on fungal pathogens suggested they could override the brain's fear response, making infected reckless and relentless, like animals in a rabid frenzy. Imagine one charging you, oblivious to a bleeding wound, driven only to attack. You could lead it into a dead-end alley or use a distraction, like smashing a window to draw its attention. What's one move you'd pull to escape an infected hot on your trail? Your mental strength is being tested every second. In The Last of Us, Ellie's humor and Joel's stubbornness keep them from cracking, but even they have dark moments. In real life, the constant dread would wear you down. A 2022 psychology study on prolonged trauma found that survivors often create mental safe spaces, memories or fantasies they retreat to under stress. Maybe you'd imagine a perfect day from before the collapse, or talk to someone who's not there like I'm talking to you. What's one memory or ritual you'd lean on to keep despair at bay? Humans remain the biggest variable. In The Last of Us, groups like the Fireflies or cannibals show how fast trust turns to betrayal. In a real apocalypse, you'd see the same. A 2021 sociology study on crisis communities found that groups survive longer with clear roles: hunters, scavengers, guards, but collapse when trust breaks. So imagine you stumble on a group in a fortified church. They've got food, water, even a generator, but they want you to prove your worth by scavenging a dangerous spot nearby. Their leader seems fair, but you catch a whisper about culling the weak. Do you join and take the risk or slip away into the night? Who's one person you'd trust to help you make that call, and why are they your anchor in this chaos? You're still out there, threading the needle through this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're crouched in the ruins of a diner, the faint smell of rotting grease in the air, or you're moving through a foggy forest, every snapped twig a potential death sentence. The world feels like it's closing in, doesn't it? Every choice is a gamble, every moment a test. So let's dig deep. What's keeping you alive right now? Is it a dream of finding a place where the infected can't reach, like the Jackson settlement in The Last of Us? Or is it just the refusal to let this nightmare win? Picture yourself in this moment. What's the one thing you're gripping? Whether it's a weapon, a keepsake, or just a flicker of hope? Let's talk about outsmarting this world. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie use every trick, crawling through ducts, setting traps, reading the terrain like a map. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to do the same. Cities are mazes of danger but packed with resources. Rural areas offer solitude but starve you of supplies. A 2021 survival analysis found that elevated hideouts, like water towers or apartment rooftops, give you a tactical edge, letting you spot infected or raiders from a distance. But they're also hard to escape if you're cornered. Are you sticking to ground level, weaving through alleys or climbing high for a better view? What's one piece of your environment you'd turn into an advantage right now? Scavenging is a race against time and competition. In The Last of Us, every looted backpack or overturned shelf might hold a prize. A bandage, a nail bomb, a scrap of food. In real life, you'd need to think beyond the obvious. A 2023 disaster recovery study pointed out that overlooked spots, like storage sheds behind gas stations or employee lockers in fast food joints, often hold untapped resources. Ever consider a car dealership? They've got batteries, tools, and maybe even keys to a working vehicle, or a daycare stocked with non-perishable snacks and first aid kits. What's one place you'd hit that others might skip? And what's the one item you'd be desperate to find? The infected are a constant threat, evolving in their own terrifying way. In The Last of Us, clickers hunt by sound, stalkers by stealth, and bloaters by brute force. A real fungal infection might not create such clear archetypes, but it could still be deadly. A 2024 study on neurological pathogens suggested fungi could disrupt the brain's motor control, making infected move erratically but tirelessly, like a machine stuck on overdrive. Imagine one lunging at you, ignoring a broken leg, driven by some primal instinct. You could bait it into a trap, maybe a barricaded door, you collapse on it, or use the environment, like leading it into a flooded basement. What's one tactic you'd use to shake an infected on your tail? Your mental resilience is under fire. In The Last of Us, Ellie's defiance and Joel's grit keep them from breaking, but even they falter. In real life, the relentless fear would claw at you. A 2022 study on survival psychology found that humans under extreme stress often rely on small acts of control, like organizing supplies or marking a calendar, to fight despair. Maybe you'd carry a notebook to sketch your plans or hum a song from before the world fell. What's one thing you'd do to keep your mind from slipping, even when the silence feels louder than the infected? Humans are still the biggest wild card. In The Last of Us, factions like the Fireflies or Hunters show how fast trust can turn to treachery. In a real apocalypse, you'd face the same. A 2020 study on post-crisis behavior found that groups thrive with clear leadership, but fracture when resources dwindle. Picture this. You find a small camp in an old warehouse with makeshift walls and a fire pit. They offer you a meal, but want you to scout a nearby infected hotspot first. Their leader seems steady, but you overhear someone muttering about newcomers not lasting. Do you take the deal, hoping to earn a place, or slip away, trusting only yourself? Who's one person you'd want by your side to navigate this, and what makes them someone you'd bet your life on? You're still fighting, carving a path through this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're holed up in the husk of an old school, the faint echo of chalkboards haunting the halls, or you're slipping through a rain-soaked alley. Your pulse hammering as shadows shift. Every moment feels like a coin toss between survival and oblivion. So let's get raw. What's keeping you from crumbling? Is it a faint hope of finding a place like the safe community of Jackson in the game? Or is it just pure grit, refusing to let the infected or this broken world claim you? Right now, what's the one thing, physical or emotional, you're clinging to that keeps you going? Let's talk about playing the long game. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie adapt to their world. using every scrap of knowledge to stay alive. Reading. Threats exploiting terrain, knowing when to strike or slip away. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to become a master of adaptation. Cities are resource-rich but deadly. Rural areas offer quiet but starve you of supplies. A 2022 survival study found that versatile hideouts, like buildings with multiple exits or access to water, are key to long-term survival. A rooftop might give you a vantage point, but a single staircase could trap you. Are you staying urban, weaving through concrete jungles, or going rural, betting on isolation? What's one feature of your current spot you'd turn into a survival edge? Scavenging is now a matter of life and death. In The Last of Us, every looted drawer or abandoned vehicle might hold a lifeline, a bandage, a battery, a shard of glass for a shiv. In real life, you'd need to outsmart desperate survivors and infected alike. A 2024 urban foraging guide suggested overlooked gold mines, like storage units in self-service facilities or maintenance rooms in public buildings, often packed with tools or preserved food. Ever think about a fire station? They've got medical supplies, heavy gear, and maybe even a working radio. Or a vet clinic, antibiotics and sedatives that work on humans too. What's one place you'd raid that others might ignore, and what's the one item you'd pray to find? The infected are a relentless nightmare. In The Last of Us, runners. Charge, stalkers slink and clickers hunt by sound. A real fungal infection might not be so theatrical, but it could still be horrifying. A 2025 microbiology study hypothesized that a cordyceps-like pathogen could disrupt the brain's sensory processing, making infected hypersensitive to movement or scent. Picture one staggering toward you, unfazed by a gash in its side, drawn to your footsteps. You could lure it into a trap, maybe a rigged car alarm to draw a horde elsewhere, or go for a silent takedown with a crowbar. What's one move you'd make to outmaneuver an infected breathing down your neck? Your mind is a battlefield too. In The Last of Us, Ellie's sharp wit and Joel's dogged resolve keep them sane, but even they teeter on the edge. In real life, the constant grind of fear and loss would erode you. A 2023 trauma study found that survivors in extreme conditions often rely on repetitive tasks, like cleaning a weapon or mapping routes, to anchor their minds. Maybe you'd carry a small token, like a keychain from a lost life, or mutter a phrase to stay focused. What's one ritual you'd lean on to keep the darkness from swallowing you? Humans are the real X factor. In The Last of Us, factions like the Fireflies or cannibals prove that survivors can be deadlier than infected. In a real apocalypse, trust would be a rare currency. A 2022 sociology study on crisis dynamics found that groups with shared goals last longer, but outsiders are often seen as threats. Imagine you find a small outpost, a fortified gas station with armed guards and a stockpile of food. They offer you a bed but demand you hand over your weapon and scout a nearby infected nest. Their leader seems genuine, but you notice one of them hiding a bloody bandage. Do you stay, risking betrayal for a shot at safety? Or slip away, trusting only your instincts? Who's one person you'd want watching your back, and what makes them your rock in this chaos? You're still alive, clawing through the wreckage of this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're barricaded in the attic of a crumbling townhouse, the faint creak of floorboards below keeping you on edge, or you're slinking through a fog-choked industrial yard, every clank of metal spiking your adrenaline. The world's a gauntlet now, and you're running it with gritted teeth. So, let's strip it down. What's fueling you to keep going? Is it a whisper of a safe haven, like the fabled Jackson settlement in The Last of Us? Or is it just sheer defiance, a middle finger to the infected and this shattered reality? Right now, in this moment, what's the one thing, be it a battered photo, a half-empty water bottle, or a stubborn spark of hope, that's keeping you from breaking? Let's dive into mastering this hellscape. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie turn every environment into a tool, using shadows for cover, rooftops for vantage points, or tight spaces to funnel enemies. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to become one with your surroundings. Cities are gold mines of supplies, but teem with infected and desperate survivors. Rural areas offer breathing room, but leave you scrambling for basics like food or medicine. A 2023 urban survival study found that multi-level buildings, like parking garages or office blocks, offer strategic advantages with stairwells for choke points and roofs for signaling or escape. But they're also mazes, easy to get trapped in if a horde corners you. Are you sticking to urban sprawl, navigating back alleys and fire escapes, or betting on the open fields of the countryside? What's one feature of your current hideout or path, a high window, a narrow bridge, that you'd exploit to stay alive? Scavenging is your lifeline, but the low-hanging fruit is long gone. In The Last of Us, Joel rummages through drawers for tape or scissors to craft a shiv. In real life, you'd need to outsmart the chaos. A 2024 disaster logistics report highlighted overlooked caches like delivery vans abandoned in loading docks or employee lounges in corporate buildings, often stocked with snacks, water, or even radios. Ever think about a funeral home? They've got formaldehyde for makeshift disinfectants and sealed snacks for memorial services. Or a community theater, costumes for camouflage, props for weapons. What's one unconventional spot you'd hit? And what's the one item you'd be praying to find there? The infected are a relentless shadow. In The Last of Us, runners sprint, stalkers creep, and clickers hunt by sound. A real fungal infection might not create such vivid archetypes, but it could still be horrifying. A 2025 study on fungal neurotoxins suggested pathogens could hijack the brain's aggression centers, turning infected into hyper-focused hunters who ignore pain or fatigue. Picture one shambling toward you, its jaw broken, but still snapping, drawn to the faintest rustle of your clothes. You could bait it into a trap, like a pile of broken glass to shred its feet, or slip away using a distraction, like tossing a brick to echo off a wall. What's one move you'd pull to lose an infected hot on your heels? Your mental fortitude is your true weapon now. In The Last of Us, Ellie's quips and Joel's resolve keep them grounded, but even they wrestle with despair. In real life, the unending grind of fear would chip away at you. A 2024 psychology study on extreme survival found that humans under prolonged stress often rely on micro-rituals, like counting breaths or tracing patterns in the dirt, to stave off panic. Maybe you'd carry a small talisman, like a coin from before the fall, or whisper a line from a favorite book. What's one thing you do daily to keep your mind from unraveling, even when the silence feels heavier than the infected's moans? Humans are the real danger now. In The Last of Us, factions like the Hunters or Fireflies show how survival twists morality. In a real apocalypse, trust is a rare commodity. A 2023 sociology study on post-crisis groups found that small communities survive by enforcing strict rules, but outsiders are often exploited or expelled. Imagine you stumble on a group camped in a fortified library, with bookshelves as walls and a makeshift armory. They offer you shelter, but demand you hand over your backpack and prove your loyalty by clearing an infected nest nearby. Their leader seems calm, but you notice one member hiding a bite mark under a sleeve. Do you risk joining them, hoping for a community, or slip away, betting on your own wits? Who's one person you'd trust to help you decide, and what makes them your anchor in this brutal world? You're still scraping by in this The Last of Us style apocalypse, a survivor in a world that wants you dead. Maybe you're huddled in the boiler room of an old factory, the hum of rusted pipes your only companion, or you're ghosting through a shattered shopping district, every broken window a potential ambush. The air feels heavier now, thick with the weight of choices that haunt you. So, let's cut to the core. What's driving you to keep fighting? Is it a flicker of hope for a place untouched by the infected, like the sanctuary Joel and Ellie chase? Or is it just the raw need to prove you can outlast this nightmare? Right now, what's the one thing, maybe a worn-out watch, a scrawled note, or a stubborn vow, that's keeping you from surrendering? Let's talk about playing the environment like a chessboard. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie turn every corner into an advantage, using high ground to spot threats, tight spaces to slow enemies, or debris to block paths. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to read your surroundings like a book. Urban zones are packed with loot, but swarm with infected and scavengers. Rural areas give you space to breathe, but leave you hunting for scraps. A 2024 urban tactics study found that mixed-use buildings, like strip malls with apartments above, Offer the best of both worlds, supplies below, defensible rooms above. But they're also magnets for looters. Are you sticking to city shadows, darting between storefronts, or staking out a rural hideout like a barn or a ranger station? What's one feature of your current spot? A skylight, a drainage ditch. That you'd weaponize to stay alive? Scavenging is a desperate art now. In The Last of Us, every overturned locker or forgotten bag might yield a prize. A rag for a Molotov, a blade for a shiv. In real life, you'd need to think like a thief. A 2025 disaster recovery report pointed to overlooked troves like utility, closets in public transit hubs or break rooms in small businesses, often holding bottled water, tools or expired snacks. Ever consider a bowling alley? They've got sealed food in concession stands and heavy pins for bludgeoning. Or a dental office, sterile gauze, painkillers, even sharp tools. What's one place you'd raid that others might pass by, and what's the one item you'd be desperate to snag? The infected are a plague that never rests. In The Last of Us, runners overwhelm with speed, stalkers strike from shadows, and clickers hunt by sound. A real fungal infection might not be so stylized, but it could still be a nightmare. A 2025 neurology study suggested pathogens could disrupt the brain's inhibition signals, making infected act on raw instinct, chasing prey beyond human endurance. Picture one lurching toward you, its arm mangled but still grasping, drawn to your scent. You could lead it into a trap, like a chain-link fence it can't climb, or create a diversion, like smashing a bottle to pull its focus. What's one trick you'd use to slip away from an infected closing in? Your mental grit is your lifeline. In The Last of Us, Ellie's sharp humor and Joel's iron will keep them from fracturing, but even they teeter on the edge. In real life, the relentless dread would grind you down. A 2024 trauma study found that survivors in extreme conditions often cling to small acts of defiance, like naming their hideouts or carving symbols into walls, to maintain identity. Maybe you'd carry a single bullet, not for fighting, but as a reminder of your control. Or maybe you'd whisper a promise to someone you've lost. What's one ritual you'd build to keep your soul intact when the world feels like a graveyard? Humans are the real wild card. In The Last of Us, groups. Like the hunters or fireflies show how survival breeds both loyalty and betrayal. In a real apocalypse, you'd face the same. A 2024 sociology study on crisis dynamics found that groups with shared rituals, like communal meals or storytelling, last longer, but outsiders are often tested brutally. Imagine you find a camp in an old train yard with makeshift tents and a guarded stockpile. They offer you a spot, but demand you prove your worth by scavenging a nearby hospital crawling with infected. Their leader seems honest, but you catch one member sharpening a knife while staring at you. Do you take the risk for a chance at community or slip away, trusting only yourself? Who's one person you'd want by your side to read this situation, and what makes them your rock in this brutal reality? You're still hanging on in this The Last of Us style apocalypse, a flicker of life in a world chewed up and spit out by chaos. Maybe you're crouched in the shell of an old laundromat, the hum of forgotten machines a ghostly reminder of normalcy, or you're threading through a maze of rusted cars on a highway, every glint of glass a potential trap. The days are a blur of hunger and fear, and survival feels like stealing moments from death's grip. So let's get raw. What's keeping you tethered to this fight? Is it a half-formed dream of a place where the infected can't reach, like the sanctuary Joel and Ellie seek? Or is it just a primal urge to spit in the face of this broken world? Right now, what's the one thing, be it a frayed bracelet, a whispered name, or a stubborn spark of will, that's holding you together? Let's talk about owning your terrain. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie make every environment a weapon, using rooftops to scout, alleys to ambush, or debris to slow pursuers. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to turn your surroundings into an extension of yourself. Cities brim with supplies but crawl with infected and scavengers. Rural areas offer solitude but starve you of essentials. A 2025 urban survival study highlighted transition zones, like industrial parks or suburban edges, as ideal for balancing access to resources and escape routes. But they're also crossroads, drawing wandering hordes or desperate survivors? Are you clinging to urban cover, slipping through shattered storefronts or staking out a rural hideout, like a shed or a cave? What's one feature of your current spot? A locked gate, a hidden crawl space that you'd leverage to stay one step ahead. Scavenging is a high-wire act now. In The Last of Us, every looted cabinet or overturned crate might hold a lifeline, a siwaswat bandage, a battery, a shard for a shiv. In real life, you'd need to outthink the desperate and the dead. A 2025 post-disaster foraging guide pointed to neglected caches, like storage lockers in apartment basements or vending machines in abandoned rec centers, often untouched by early looters. Ever consider a pet grooming salon? They stock sealed food for animals, which humans can eat in a pinch, and scissors sharp enough for defense. Or a church, canned goods from charity drives, candles for light. What's one off-the-radar place you'd hit? And what's the one item you'd be begging to find? The infected are a plague without pause. In The Last of Us, runners overwhelm, stalkers slink, and clickers track sound with eerie precision. A real fungal infection might not be so theatrical, but it could still be a horror show. A 2025 microbiology study suggested pathogens could disrupt the brain's pain pathways, letting infected move through injuries that would stop a normal human. Picture one shambling toward you, its leg twisted but still lurching, drawn to the faint creak of your boots. You could draw it into a trap, like a stairwell you've rigged to collapse, or create a diversion, like kicking a can to echo down a street. What's one move you'd pull to shake an infected that's locked onto you? Your mental armor is what's really keeping you alive. In The Last of Us, Ellie's defiance and Joel's grit are their lifelines, but even they falter, under the weight of loss. In real life, the constant terror would carve grooves in your psyche. A 2025 trauma study found that survivors often anchor themselves with tactile habits, like rubbing a stone or folding a piece of cloth, to fight off despair. Maybe you'd carry a single key from a home you'll never see again, or mutter a E line from a song to ground yourself. What's one small act you'd do each day to remind yourself you're more than just a survivor? Humans are the true wildcard. In The Last of Us, factions like the Fireflies or Cannibals show how survival twists the soul. In a real apocalypse, trust is a gamble that could pay off or cost everything. A 2025 sociology study on post-crisis. Groups found that communities with shared labor, like farming or guard duty, survive longer, but they often demand total loyalty, viewing outsiders as threats. Imagine you find a group holed up in a fortified auto shop, with tire walls and a small garden. They offer you a bunk, but insist you surrender your weapon and lead a scavenging run into an infected heavy zone. Their leader seems steady, but you overhear two members whispering about cutting losses if supplies run low. Do you join, risking betrayal for a shot at stability, or slip away, banking on your own instincts? Who's one person you'd want beside you to navigate this choice, and what makes them someone you'd trust with your life? You're still breathing, threading through the jagged edges of this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're crouched in the husk of an old pharmacy, the faint smell of spilled antiseptic stinging your nose, or you're moving through a rain-slicked railway yard, every clatter of loose gravel a potential death knell. The world's a pressure cooker now, and you're caught in its steam. Every choice a razor's edge between survival and oblivion. So let's dig into your core. What's keeping you from folding? Is it a faint echo of a safe zone, like the whispered havens in The Last of Us? Or is it just a feral need to outlast the infected and this shattered reality? Right now, what's the one thing, be it a cracked locket, a scribbled map, or a defiant spark, that's anchoring you to this fight? Let's talk about turning your environment into a fortress. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie exploit every nook, using high perches to scout, bottlenecks to trap enemies, or shadows to vanish. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to make your terrain an ally. Cities pulse with supplies but swarm with infected and scavengers. Rural zones offer quiet but leave you scrounging for basics. A 2025 tactical survival study emphasized defensible hybrids. Places like small factories or community centers with multiple exits, sturdy walls, and nearby water sources. But they're also beacons for roving bands. Are you hunkering down in urban chaos, slinking through shattered high-rises, or betting on a rural bolt hole like a hunting lodge or a cave? What's one feature of your current hideout, a reinforced door, a rooftop hatch, that you'd turn into a survival? Hedge? Scavenging is a desperate dance now. In The Last of Us, every looted shelf or forgotten duffel might yield a treasure. A bandage, a spark plug, a rusty nail for a trap. In real life, you'd need to outwit the desperate and the dead. A 2025 urban foraging report highlighted untapped caches like maintenance rooms in subway stations or storage sheds at construction sites, often packed with tools, batteries, or canned drinks. Ever think about a roller rink? They've got snack bars with sealed chips and sturdy skates for makeshift armor. Or a public pool, chlorine for water purification, first aid kits in lifeguard stations. What's one overlooked spot you'd raid? And what's the one item you'd be praying to score? The infected are a relentless tide. In The Last of Us, runners charge with feral speed, stalkers lurk with cunning, and clickers hunt by sound. A real fungal infection might not be so cinematic, but it could still be a horror show. A 2025 neuroscience study suggested pathogens could override the brain's fatigue signals, letting infected pursue prey far beyond normal limits, like a predator locked in overdrive. Picture one staggering toward you, its shoulder dislocated, but still clawing, drawn to the faint rustle of your pack. You could lure it into a trap, like a flooded basement it can't escape, or use a distraction, like tossing a stone to echo off a wall. What's one tactic you'd pull to lose an infected hot on your trail? Your mental strength is your real shield. In The Last of Us, Ellie's sharp wit and Joel's grim resolve keep them from breaking, but even they crack under the weight of despair. In real life, the unending grind of fear would erode your edges. A 2025 psychology study on survival trauma found that humans often cling to repetitive acts, like sharpening a knife or humming a tune, to anchor their sanity. Maybe you'd carry a single button from a lost friend's coat or recite a poem under your breath. What's one small ritual you'd lean on to keep the darkness from swallowing you whole? Humans are the ultimate gamble. In The Last of Us, factions, like the Hunters or Fireflies, show how survival twists loyalty into treachery. In a real apocalypse, trust is a coin you flip at your peril. A 2025 anthropology study on post-crisis societies found that groups with shared tasks, like scavenging or fortifying, survive longer, but they often demand brutal initiation to weed out the weak. Imagine you find a camp in a boarded-up motel with solar lights and a small armory. They offer you a spot, but require you to surrender your supplies and lead a raid on a nearby infected stronghold. Their leader seems fair, but you spot one member hiding a stash of food, whispering to others. Do you join, risking betrayal for a chance at community, or slip away, trusting only your own grit? Who's one person you'd want beside you to read this situation, and what makes them someone you'd stake your life on? You've made it this far, a stubborn spark in the ashes of this The Last of Us style apocalypse. Maybe you're holed up in the skeletal remains of a fire station, the faint creak of a loose shutter your only company, or you're creeping through a fog-draped forest, every snapped twig a scream in the silence. The world's a crucible now, forging you through hunger, fear, and loss. So, let's strip it bare. What's kept you alive? Is it a dream of a safe haven, like the fleeting hope of Jackson in The Last of Us? Or is it just raw, unyielding will, refusing to let the infected or this broken reality claim you? Right now, in this final moment, what's the one thing, be it a worn dog tag, a whispered vow, or a defiant heartbeat, that's carried you through the fire? Let's talk about mastering the end game. In The Last of Us, Joel and Ellie turn every scrap of their world into a lifeline, using terrain to outmaneuver enemies, scavenging to stretch their survival, and grit to face the impossible. In a real apocalypse, you'd need to be a tactician, a scavenger, and a survivor all at sea. Once, cities are loot-rich but deadly, crawling with infected and raiders. Rural areas offer solitude but demand you hunt or grow your own food. A 2025 survival strategy study emphasized adaptive strongholds, places like small warehouses or rural farmhouses with access to water, defensible perimeters, and room for traps. But no spot is perfect. A warehouse might have supplies, but echo with every step drawing infected. Are you fortifying a city hideout, like a locked office tower, or staking out a rural refuge like a cabin with a well? What's one feature of your final stand, a barred window, a hidden trapdoor, that you'd make your fortress? Scavenging is your last lifeline. In The Last of Us, every looted glove box or dusty shelf might hold a miracle, a bandage, a spark for a fire, a nail for a trap. In real life, you'd need to outsmart a world picked clean. A 2025 disaster scavenging guide pointed to forgotten caches, like janitor closets in civic centers or storage rooms in bowling alleys, often holding bottled water, tools, or sealed snacks. Ever consider a bicycle shop? They've got repair kits, lightweight gear, and maybe even a working bike for quick escapes. Or a thrift store, sturdy clothes, backpacks, and odd tools hidden in donation bins. What's one final place you'd raid, and what's the one item you'd trade your last breath to find? The infected are a nightmare that never fades. In The Last of Us, runners swarm, stalkers ambush, and clickers hunt with eerie precision. A real fungal infection might not be so theatrical, but it could still be a horror show. A 2025 microbiology study suggested pathogens could hijack the brain's motor systems, making infected relentless, ignoring wounds that would drop a normal human. Picture one lurching toward you, its face half gone but still snarling, drawn to the faint heat of your body. You could rig a trap, like a tripwire tied to a falling beam, or slip away with a distraction, like a flare tossed into the dark. What's one last trick you'd use to outwit an infected that's got your scent? Your mental resilience is your true anchor. In The Last of Us, Ellie's sharp defiance and Joel's grim determination keep them human, but even they bend under the weight of despair. In real life, the endless grind of survival would test your soul. A 2025 psychology study on extreme endurance found that survivors often rely on legacy acts, small gestures, like leaving messages for others or planting a seed, to feel their life matters. Maybe you'd carry a single photo, creased from clutching it, or carve your initials into a tree as proof you were here. What's one final ritual you'd hold on to remind yourself you're more than just prey in this world? Humans are the final gamble. In The Last of Us, factions like the Fireflies or Cannibals show how survival twists trust into a weapon. In a real apocalypse, alliances could save you or doom you. A 2025 sociology study on post-crisis communities found that groups with shared purpose, like rebuilding or defending, last longer, but they often demand total sacrifice, shunning those who waver. Imagine you find a settlement in a fortified train depot with wind turbines and a communal kitchen. They offer you a place, but require you to surrender all your gear and swear loyalty, including fighting off raiders. Their leader seems earnest, but you catch a glimpse of chained prisoners in a back room. Do you join, betting on their strength, or slip away, trusting only your own path? Who's one person you'd want beside you to make this call? And what makes them your unyielding ally in this brutal endgame? This is your final stand. You've outrun infected, outsmarted raiders, and outlasted despair. Whether you're building a new life in a fragile community or carving a solitary path through the ruins, you've become something more than a survivor. You're a testament to what it means to endure. So, one last time, what's the one thing you'd leave behind, a mark on this world to say you were here, a note for the next wanderer, a planted seed, or just your footprints fading in the dust? The apocalypse tried to break you, but you're still standing. That's your victory.